Okay, I have a slightly different video idea today. I asked everybody over on my YouTube community tab and on my Instagram stories to respond with unpopular Bon Jovi opinions that they have that, they think maybe not many other people might have. Slightly controversial ones, And I got 70 responses from people. But everyone's opinions were great, so thank you for sending them. Well, no, they weren't all great. Some of them were, absolutely diabolical, and I just... I don't know, but they were all very thought-provoking, shall we say. So anyway, I've kind of split them up into different categories. The first few that I've got are all about specific band members, and then it kind of goes chronologically through the albums and the songs. And then at the end, I've just got miscellaneous stuff that didn't really fit into any other category. So the first ones that I've got are all to do with band members, and specifically Richie, because everyone's got unpopular opinions about Richie. Okay, regarding Richie, I have avoided talking about Richie because it's so controversial. I don't want the negativity. I try to make the channel a very positive place, and I think bringing up Richie sometimes is it doesn't have that effect. I think it causes quite a stir. Disclaimers. I obviously love both John and Richie, and I think it's a real shame that there's this feud between fans. I think it's ridiculous because you can be a fan of both of them, or you can be a fan of one of them, and you can appreciate the other one still, even if you don't particularly agree with them or like them. What I do feel like, though, is that Richie's kind of this untouchable entity in the Bon Jovi fandom. And I understand why. I think people get really protective over him because a lot of people have really unfair criticisms or remarks about him. They'll just say stuff like, oh, he looks drunk, which is just, firstly... he's had substance abuse issues, it's a touchy subject, it doesn't need to be brought up, and I think it's unfair to bring that up in a spiteful way. But a lot of the time, having said that, if you raise a very valid concern or criticism regarding Richie, you're really often crucified, and it's not fair because I have criticisms of him that don't relate to any of that stuff, I also worry that people think that I'm biased towards John, which would be a fair assumption, considering if you look at my channel, a lot of it's John Bon Jovi related. Clearly, I'm a bigger fan of John, but I'm not someone that's I can't see that John Bon Jovi's done something wrong. I'm not like that. I have critiques of both of them, but in this very situation, the whole Richie having left the band and them both speaking at each other through interviews, I lean towards John's side in this, and I don't want people to think that's just because I'm a big John fan. I'm just looking at what I'm seeing, and I think Richie said some stuff recently that's very out of order. Anyway, here are your unpopular opinions about Richie. Number 1, John has been talking about Richie's substance abuse issues very condescendingly for the past 20 years. I don't know. I actually don't know. I don't know how to say that, because from what I've seen, I would say that I mostly disagree, but then again, this, you said 20 years. I'm not even 20. I don't know what was said back then. I've seen interviews from that time, but there could always be stuff lost to time, stuff that's never been put on YouTube or any other websites, articles that I've never read. He could have said some shitty stuff that I'm just not aware of. But as far as what I've seen, I would say no. There was this weird period in which, when Richie was struggling, that interviewers would just constantly bring it up to John, which I just think is a bit scummy. I don't think he probably doesn't want to talk about that. And also, I don't know. From what I've seen, John always just kind of handled it with grace and was always like, Richie's doing great, Richie's doing great. But I don't know, maybe there's stuff I haven't seen. I do recall, what did he say? I think it was a 2020 interview where John said something like, I wish with all my heart that Richie had his life together and was still in the band, which I think was a sweet sentiment, and I think he was making it with good intention, but I get that it comes across fairly rude, quite rude, yeah. Even if to John he's looking at Richie and he thinks, oh, his life's a bit of a mess, he's got substance abuse issues and he's not settled down. Even if he's thinking that and he's just trying to be I don't know why he said that. I would be fuming if I was Richie. Even if my life wasn't together, I'd be like, who are you to decide if my life is together or not together, or if I'm happy or not happy? That's probably the closest I've ever got. I don't think it was that big of a deal because I think clearly it was meant with good intention, but I can understand Richie being absolutely flabbergasted by that comment. So I guess that's condescending. I don't think it was intended to come off like that, though. Whereas I think a lot of Richie's comments recently are quite intended to be snarky. I don't really see any other way. It's not like he's saying it to be nice. He's actually just being a dick. Which leads to my next point, which says... Actually, I've got 2 points here which are quite similar. The first one says, John needs to stop talking about Richie. Which I'm not in agreement with, because John has said the exact same thing for 12 years. It's not his fault that interviewers just keep asking him the same question, which, I mean, it's boring to watch and it's boring to listen to. It's probably boring for him. But he always says there was no fight, there was no animosity, the door's open, and then that's honestly it, except for the comment that I've just mentioned. Whereas Richie, oh my gosh, I love him, but the way he talks about John these days is quite whack. And it's quite bitter. I mean, I really don't want people to think that I'm just saying, like, oh, well, John said nothing. Like, if he said something arsehole-ish, then tell me. But I watched Richie's recent interviews, and I'm like, John would never dream of saying something this nasty. It's horrible. The Billy Corgan podcast, the one where... And also the one that he did not long after the documentary got released. I can't remember which one it was. He's taken shots at John's voice, which is what... You know, everything else beforehand, I was kind of like, well, you know, fair enough, whatever. I understand being annoyed, but it's fine. But he's taken shots at John's voice now, which I think is an incredibly low blow. I think it's very nasty behaviour. And it's made his current attitude really dislikable to me. Which is a shame because, again, I adore Richie. I love him so much. But it's just, as a musician, I try to imagine not being able to play again in the same way that John can't sing. And it's a sickening thought. It's horrible. It doesn't matter that he's 63. If you've done something your whole life, it's been your passion, your job, and also a sort of release and output. It's just nasty to bring that up against someone. He's criticised John for getting the surgery, which probably seemed like his only option. He did everything holistically. He called him an idiot for getting that surgery, which I would like to see what you would do, Mr. Sambora. And in the Billy Corgan podcast, he made sly digs at John's vocal problems now. And also in the 80s when, John... I can't remember what it was he said. Billy Corgan said something like, oh, well, I'm sure that if you could, you would have loved to have toured 7 days a week because, it was just such an amazing experience. And Richie was like, well, I could, implying that the only reason that they didn't do that was because John couldn't, because John was having vocal issues and John couldn't sing properly throughout some of those Slippery When Wet shows, which is ridiculous. If you were the lead singer, you would not be able to do 7 shows a night. Enough said. Like, why? It's just, I don't understand. Why would you say that? It's petty behaviour, it's snide behaviour. He did try and walk it back, which once again, like the fact that he walked it back eliminates any doubt that he wasn't trying to be snarky. It's mean girl behaviour. I'm over it. You're, like, how old is he? Is he 65? Stop. I don't care what John Bon Jovi says. There is animosity. The other one that was similar to that one was someone said Richie brings up John's name for attention, which this isn't true either. In fairness to Richie, that's just not true. Interviewers bring John up. The way he answers the questions could be considered a problem, but it's not. I don't think Richie's just constantly bringing up John's name. The next one is Richie should come back, but I get why he's not in the band anymore. For reasons that I've just stated, I think that the ship has sailed. I really do. Richie's in a situation where I think he's so angry. I really think he's very angry at John. I don't know what John's sentiments are towards the situation. It's really weird. I think the way that I've always looked at the situation is that Richie left because he was feeling undervalued and appreciated, which is a real shame and shouldn't have happened. So he walked out in the middle of a tour. Questionable, but he's apologised, it's fine. John has always said that the door is open. Obviously Bon Jovi is struggling at the moment. Richie's absence is noticeable, but it wouldn't be such a hindrance to the band if John could sing. I think the fact that the lead singer can't sing is much more of a detriment to the band than the fact that Richie's left. I'm not saying that Richie's presence isn't noticeable, because it absolutely is. You know that I like the more recent stuff. I really like that stuff. But if I was an older fan, I probably wouldn't, because there's not as many guitars. Lyrically, they're absolutely at their strongest, which is why I love them so much, because that's what I really like. But melodically, they're not necessarily groundbreaking. You can see that Richie's not there, right? And that's, that's always going to be noticeable. However, if John could sing still, they wouldn't be having the kinds of live shows that they're having currently. It wouldn't be a problem as much. People would notice, maybe diehard fans wouldn't want to go and see them. It wouldn't be such a public scandal, right? The fact that the lead singer can't sing is the number one struggle. Yes, Richie's contribution makes a difference, but it wouldn't cure that fundamental problem. If Richie came back to the band, yes, his singing, his backing vocals would obviously boost John, but it's not going to cure the fundamental problem that John can't sing. It's still going to be noticeable. It's still probably not going to be great. I think people think that when and if Richie comes back to the band, everything's going to be fixed and it's going to be great, but it's not, It's probably going to have an awkward atmosphere. John still won't be able to sing any better than he could before, probably. I don't think it's the quick fix that people want, and I think it would be really awkward. I don't think that they're the same. I don't think that they're friends anymore, really. Anyway, as I was saying, I think John's always said that the door is open. Richie looks at Bon Jovi now and thinks, look, they need me. They can't do it without me. Which I don't think is true. They would be okay. Obviously, again, it would be noticeable, but they would be surviving if it weren't for John's problems. John's left the door wide open, and he says constantly, every time someone asks about Richie, he says, I'm waiting for a call, the door's open. But I think Richie, on the other hand, is wanting John to call. I think he wants John to call him and beg him and say, we need you back, the band's not the same without you, blah, blah, blah. I think both of their egos in this situation are huge, but Richie's constantly saying he'll rejoin, and John would be crazy not to let him rejoin. So why hasn't he? I think it's because John hasn't asked. And, why would he? Richie left. Why would he call back like, oh, please, we need you? Okay, next we have, if Richie didn't join the band, they never would have been as big as they are. John would maybe have written some great songs, but they were a true writing team and better together. Wanted and many others would never have been written. This is objectively true. Absolutely. Do I think that John is capable of writing great songs on his own? Of course. I don't think that they would have been the kind of songs that would have made them so famous at the time, Okay, next one. As much as John is the face of the band, it would have been nice to see other members do more, like talk in shows or sing songs. Well, to be fair, they did do quite a bit. If we look at live shows, Richie sings a lot. Richie sings in every song, pretty much. And gets his solo moments, in Blood and Blood. Alec gets a solo moment in certain Blood on Blood shows. They all get, in the cover songs, they all get to sing lots, like in Drift Away, in, what's it called? With a Little Help from My Friends, they all get to sing. I think they sing quite a bit. It would always be nice to have seen them do more. They could talk more in shows, I get that, but they do sing songs. Next one says Alec was the coolest member. Yeah, you could absolutely make that argument. He was the most rock and roll of them all, bit of a diva. Next is Hugh not being named an official member. Oh wait, hang on. I've got a few about Hugh. Hugh not being named an official member for so long is such a disservice. Hugh is a phenomenal bassist but has absolutely no stage presence. And someone else said Hugh has no stage presence. Absolutely. He is a phenomenal bassist. I prefer him technically to Alec, but Alec's stage presence was unmatched. He had the aura. He was a great addition to the band in the 80s and early 90s. Him and Richie and John always had great interactions on stage. Hugh just stands there. Do you ever see Hugh smile? No. Do you ever see him talk? Very rarely. He has absolutely no stage presence. He's just there. Or you can hear the bass, but you can't actually see him because he's doing nothing. Okay, next is, controversial. A couple ones about John Shanks. Okay. Not a fan of John Shanks. It's clear he changed a lot of Bon Jovi's sound, and him becoming an official member doesn't sit right with me. Shanks having more say in the songs is one of the reasons Richie left. And then the next one is, John Shanks killed Bon Jovi's creativity. They should have sacked him after the incredibly generic production of The Circle and What About Now. Without the album cover, I can't even differentiate the songs between What About Now, The Circle, and This Has Enough Sale. What I will say about John Shanks is I think it's very funny the way that fans depict him. I am not a Shanks fan, really. I like some of the stuff that he's done with the band, for the band. This Has Enough Sale is one of my favourite albums. Obviously, Shanks had a big part of that. But people act as if he is the sole reason for a lot of the changes in Bon Jovi, which is categorically untrue. People act as if it's some kind of a fairy tale, and John Shanks is this, like, evil, mystical being, like Rumpelstiltskin, that's carrying out his evil deeds through John Bon Jovi, who he's bewitched. And, like, John's got no idea. He's, like, under some mind control spell. He's got no idea what he's doing, but he's just doing all of Shanks' bidding. That's how people act. People act like John has no free will, no say, no, you know, he doesn't even know what he's doing. John is sanctioning all of these choices, and it was clear from Destination Anywhere and from Crush and then from some of those earlier albums that he was wanting to go in a different direction. Like, yes, Shanks has been a huge influence, some negative, some positive, but people act like John's just completely unaware and that Shanks is this evil entity, which maybe he is. I've heard people refer to him as an infestation. I don't like him. He's kind of that one guy that was, like, not invited in the first place, and then he's massively overstayed his welcome. As for the production of The Circle, What About Now, and This Has Not For Sale, I think it might be more your fault if you can't differentiate the songs, because they do all have a significantly different sound, like, not even just with John's voice, but I guess there's some overlap between This Has Not For Sale and What About Now, but The Circle is so different sounding, like, it's got a much heavier sound, except for in songs like When We Were Beautiful, but other than that, it's got much more of a kick to it than the other two, so I don't know. I can't imagine getting confused between them. Next one is David is so freaking talented and has been underutilised for 40 years. Absolutely. David is... Without David, I wouldn't be a diehard Bon Jovi fan. As a, everyone knows, or not everyone knows, I know, I am a piano player, so naturally David is kind of, like, my favourite part of Bon Jovi. Obviously, John's singing as well, but David I just love. And he made the band stand out from bands that were in a similar vein. And he has moments, he does have moments where he shines, like on Pink Flamingos, and then later stuff like Right Side of Wrong. But those are all mainly live, and he could have been more utilised in studio, I guess. Okay, next. Phil X is the most underrated guitarist in the world right now, but still no Richie. I can't really speak to that because, I've already said I'm not a big guitar person. I don't keep up with the world of guitars, and I don't know anything about it. Phil's great though, so I don't doubt it, but I couldn't begin to say yes or no. And then another one about Phil. This one's horrible. Phil X's backing vocals are the worst part of any song they're in. Damn. I don't mind Phil's backing vocals. They don't meld with John's too well, but especially not in comparison to Richie. They're okay. They don't. I'm a bit indifferent to them. Okay, next one is John Collins should have had at least one more album with the band. I was confused about this because I was like, am I stupid? Who is John Collins? And then I was like, maybe they mean Peter Collins, the guy that did These Days. But I'm like, but they said John Collins, and I don't know who John Collins is. I tried to Google it, and I didn't see anything. So I'm going to assume that you mean Peter Collins, and I'm going to say yeah. And, I'm sure someone in the comments will let me know who John Collins is. Okay, I've got two that are pretty much the same. John chooses the wrong singles, and then John's single choices, especially after These Days, have cost Bon Jovi millions and multiple mega hits. For example, One Wild Night instead of Say It Isn't So, Last Man Standing instead of Welcome to Wherever You Are. This is absolutely true. I think everyone, or at least I think most people, will agree. John's terrible at picking single choices. In fact, he often leaves a lot of the best songs off the album. I think he's just got a different taste in songs to, like, most Bon Jovi fans. He has definitely picked some singles that I'm just like, why? Why is that a single? For example, Welcome to Wherever You Are. Why is that a single? One Wild Night would have been a fantastic single in the vein of It's My Life, possibly even bigger. Even on 2020, like as recent as 2020, we've had songs like Unbroken, which to be fair did accompany a documentary, Limitless, which I heard was actually Dorothea's choice, which, okay, Dorothea. Story of Love, which is a very personal song, again, to John. We could have had Brothers in Arms, we could have had Let It Rain, maybe Beautiful Drug instead of Limitless. 2020 would have had a better reputation if it had some of those slightly heavier songs. Even if we look, like, way back to Keep the Faith, I Believe was a single. I adore that song, but there are plenty of more radio-friendly songs. Okay, next. I wish we had gotten a song that showcased Tico's jazz sensibilities. A full-on jazz song would have been impossible, but something along the lines of Jeff Porcaro, I don't know who that is, work on Toso would have been great. Yeah, I don't know who that is, and I don't really know very much about jazz music. But there are moments in Bon Jovi live shows where you really see great jazz. Like, for example, if you look at some of the interludes in Let It Rock, you've got David, you've got Tico, and you've got Alec, and they're all having, like, this little jazz moment, you know? So they definitely can do it, and they're definitely very good for it, and they've all got a great sense of rhythm and everything, so I think it would have worked. I don't know if it would have worked on an album, but sure. I think the closest we ever got to jazz from the band is probably something like This Left Feels Right. There are some jazzy moments, like Bad Name on This Left Feels Right, that's kind of jazzy in a way. This next one's a bit weird. Debut and New Jersey are the best albums. I just don't see a universe in which you can make the argument that the debut is one of the best albums, or is the best album. You can make the argument for Jersey, that's fine, but the debut is just unseasoned. That's the word I would use. Like, I love it, but the band evolved. They've done 16 studio albums now, and they evolved, and they got better at their craft since their first one. There are great songs on the debut, don't get me wrong. Shot Through the Heart is great. It's a glimpse into their later stuff. Roulette is great. It's you know, it's got great solo, but there's not a lot of variation on the debut. There are things that album does really well that maybe others don't. Like, it's energetic throughout, it's lighthearted, it's fun, early 80s vibes, and you can kind of put it on at any time because it's not like, you know, it's not heavy hitting like these days or something. I don't know, they got better. That's all I can say. Like, instrumentally they evolved, they got better. Fantastic solos on the debut album, but they got better. Lyrically, every song on that debut album is the same. There's no depth. John was like 20 or 21 years old writing these. He didn't have anything to say beyond like, oh, love, oh, lust, you know. Lyrically they improved. Instrumentally they improved. They learned how to properly structure songs and tell stories in their songs and create certain atmospheres with different instruments. Yeah, I don't think you can say that the debut is the objective best. I would be interested to know why you think that, though, because I don't know. I don't see a universe in which it's possible. Another one in a similar vein. The first two albums are just as good as Slippery When Wet and New Jersey. They aren't remembered as the others, and if they were released later, they would have been some of the best Bon Jovi albums. Again, I don't think that's true for the reasons that I've just mentioned. If we're being honest, if we had had Slippery When Wet and New Jersey, and then Fahrenheit and Debut came afterwards, it would have been seen as a huge downgrade, which it would have been. They would have gone backwards in terms of songwriting. We would have had great ballads like I'll Be There For You, succeeded by, Love Lies? Great, fantastic songs like Prayer and Wanted and Blood on Blood, which are all these great storytelling songs. And then they would have been followed by the debut, in which every song, there's no lyrical depth on the debut. If that had come afterwards, everyone would be like, what's happened? They were branching out on on albums like Slippery and New Jersey. They were making unique and experimental songs like Social Disease, for example. It's not everyone's favourite, it's my favourite. It's not everyone's favourite, but they were including stuff like Brass. Homebound Train, that was an experimental song. Wanted is an experimental song. So is stuff like Love for Sale. There's a great variety on all these albums. The debut is the opposite. There is no variety. There is nothing particularly distinguishable beyond the odd song, Shot Through the Heart, that's quite distinguishable. Runaway, I guess, is distinguishable. And that's good for the debut. I think that's part of the reason that it works so well, is because it's just fun, you can just put it on. But part of the reason that the first two albums are so loved is because they've been buried, they've been forgotten. They're great rock songs, they've got a bit of a punch to them, especially on Fahrenheit, and there are some great gems in there, but they're immature albums. If they had been released after Bon Jovi had already established their fame with Slippery and Jersey, they would have been ripped to shreds by critics, and they wouldn't be well respected. The band would have been mocked. And these are good albums, but they're good albums considering everything. They were young. If they'd have come out when John was approaching his 30s, it would have been just this is immature, If we look at all the aspects of what makes a song or an album objectively good, Slippery and New Jersey just do it a lot better. Okay, next. Runaway is an annoyingly overrated song by John and the media. I think it's a good song. And I think, do I think it's a masterpiece? No. But I think it's understandable that people love it. Like, it's, it's their first song, and it's John's first properly released song, so I think it's sentimental, as it would be. But I'm sure that he would admit that a lot of his songs are better, and he just has a bit of a soft spot for it. This next one is wild. I actually read this and I was like, what? It says, if The Price of Love was a Slippery When Wet song, it would be as big as Prayer. And I don't understand this one. I would be really interested to know why you think that. Because if I don't know, if I look at all the aspects that made Prayer so big and so innovative, The Price of Love doesn't have any of them. Like, it just doesn't possess any of them. It's not particularly unique. It doesn't even stand out amongst Fahrenheit to most listeners, I don't think. It's probably somewhere in the middle if I were to like attempt a Fahrenheit ranking outside of bias. Like, lyrically it's okay, but it's not the wow factor of Prayer. Prayer is unique from the get-go. You've got the intro with the synths, which are synths that are just like new. They sound new for the time. They've got this instantly recognisable bass line, a storyline featuring two characters, which I don't think they've really ever done before. And it's also got this like upbeat and uplifting message which people can connect to. And you've got obviously the phenomenal keyboard stuff, and then you've got John's insane vocals, which are like absolutely stand out. If you look at Prayer, it really is a fantastic vocal performance. And you've got the key change. The Price of Love doesn't have any of those. Prayer is like a unique and brilliant song as soon as you put it on, and then it just gets better. Whereas like The Price of Love, I would be really interested to know what made you think this, because I look at it and I just think it's a very bland album song. It doesn't have a wow factor, which you would need for one, a single, but two, for it to be as big as Living on a Prayer. I don't understand. Next is one that I absolutely agree with. John elevated the Animals covers. The originals have very monotone vocals. I think that he absolutely elevated them. Everyone knows that the 90s Animals covers are some of my absolute favourite Bon Jovi moments in Bon Jovi history. Especially Yokohama and Osaka. I think everyone knows that I obsess over them. I watch them religiously. They inject so much energy into those covers. The originals are great though. I wouldn't say that they've got necessarily monotone vocals, and I also wouldn't say that's a detriment. But I suppose it does lack the energy that John puts into them live. John puts his everything into those covers. He screams his arse off. You could probably hear him from the other side of the stadium, even if he wasn't mic'd up. I don't know. I talk about it a lot in my best performances video. I'm struggling to articulate it here because I'm so excited at the thought of Bon Jovi playing the Animals. And then in relation to that, we've got John's deeper register is rich and beautiful and has been vastly underused. Yes. In the Animals covers, for example, we get a great insight into what he sounds like with his deeper register, which I don't think we'd ever really heard before that. And then you've got songs where you can kind of see it, like you've got Save a Prayer, you've got Cold Hard Heart. His lower register's stunning. It should have been utilised way more often. It's gorgeous. I love it as much as his, insane whistle notes. Okay, next we have... 90s are the best Bon Jovi era. I don't think that's an unpopular opinion. I think a lot of people would say that. In These Arms is the best Bon Jovi love song. I don't know if you can really say that. I don't know if you can actually name a best Bon Jovi love song. Like, for example, you've got Bed of Roses, and then you've got stuff like Real Love, and then Born to Be My Baby, if that counts. They're all technically love songs, but they're so vastly different that I just don't think that you can compare them. There are so many love songs, there are so many Bon Jovi love songs, they're all so different. I just don't think you can name an objective best one. Blame It on the Love of Rock and Roll should have been a single. No. Definitely not. Bon Jovi, they've always been fighting the cheesy allegations. Everyone's always like, oh, they're so cheesy, they're so cheesy. This would have just been... It would have made them a target for critics to be like, oh, they're so cheesy. It's got this, the melody, the lyrics. It's a fun album track, but it didn't need to be a single. It's too cheesy. This is diabolical. The jungle bit in Keep the Faith was weird. Reminded me of Guns N' Roses. How dare you? The jungle part in Keep the Faith is unmatched. Next. The These Days tour is absolutely superior to any Bon Jovi tour. This is from Grace. I wouldn't say that's necessarily the case. I think it's a great tour, but I think certain tours excel at different things. I think These Days is such an it's a great all-rounder. Like, it's got the great set lists, it's got the great stage itself, stage design. John's vocals were probably not as strong as they were in Keep the Faith, but very, very, very strong. It kind of had a similar energy of Keep the Faith. So you could be right, but I think it's personal preference. I think what you like would determine what the best tour for you. I don't think you can say something is absolutely superior. The Spanish This Ain't a Love Song is better than the English one, but the best one combines the both of them, Buenos Aires. I like them both, but I do like the Spanish one. I think that's personal preference again. But you could definitely make the argument. Lie to Me is very, very cheesy. I think Bon Jovi are kind of, early Bon Jovi at least, are known for their cheesiness. But I don't think these days is cheesy. I don't think at all. I don't think I find anything about Lie to Me cheesy, actually. Never mind very, very cheesy. I think it's kind of too somber for that. I don't know. Something to Believe In is probably the second best Bon Jovi song. Second? No, I'm joking. I mean, it is my personal favourite. I absolutely agree. I mean, what are you putting at one? Dry County? My Guitar Lays Bleeding? I don't know. But yeah, I think Something to Believe In would definitely be in the top 10 greatest Bon Jovi songs. My Guitar Lies Bleeding in My Arms is one of the heaviest Bon Jovi songs. I don't think many people would disagree with that. Definitely. Pre-1999 and post-1999 are two different bands. I can definitely see the perspective here. I love both periods for the band, and I don't think one is good, one is bad. You know, obviously I have an obsession with 2010s Bon Jovi, which I think is kind of rare. Everyone checked out by that point. But they are different. Obviously there are times where you see the older Bon Jovi poke out in the newer stuff, but the instrumentation, the production quality, it's so different. I understand. Sex Cells is better than Crush. Well, we'll never quite know what Sex Cells really sounded like, but yeah, I would say yes. This is an interesting one. If Crush went according to plan and Bruce Fairbairn hadn't died, Bon Jovi would have had sales equivalent to their 80s days in the US and would be considered in a way higher regard by non-Bon Jovi fans. It would have had the same quality as Keep the Faithful these days. I absolutely agree with this, and I don't think that it was just Bruce's death. I think it was obvious with Destination Anywhere and the kinds of songs that John had started writing that he was wanting to go a bit left. But I agree. There were songs written for Crush that would have most likely made it if Bruce hadn't died. I don't exactly have proof for that, but that's what I feel like. A lot of the quirkier songs might not have made it. We probably have got heavier rock stuff like Welcome to the Good Times or like Gimme Some or something. The explosion of It's My Life gave Crush such a boost in sales, and if Crush had been great, people would have known it. It would have been like Slippery When Wet, because they bought the single It's My Life, they bought Crush, they went to see Crush. Is it like the rest of It's My Life? But it wasn't like it wasn't like It's My Life. It was such a different album. If the songs on Crush had contained all of these, outtakes that got left off that were heavier and they were solid songs, not only would they have had like how on Jersey they had like 5 top 10 singles, if the rest of Crush had been like It's My Life, they could have had that again, absolutely. And it would be considered in the same kind of regard as Keep the Faith or these days. Look, if Bon Jovi had had the successful consecutive run of Slippery When Wet, New Jersey, Keep the Faith these days, and then a slightly stronger version of Crush, and then Bounce, they would have cemented themselves as rock gods. Not that they haven't, but they would have been, you're right, they would have been considered in much higher regard by non-Bon Jovi fans. Everything after Crush was poor compared to that before it. I disagree. I think Crush is actually a weaker album because so much good stuff was left off it, but Bounce is a great rock record. Have a Nice Day is fantastic. There's really not very much I would change about Have a Nice Day. Highway is my favourite 2000s album. Very different, and I understand why core Bon Jovi fans don't like it, but it was experimental and it wasn't necessarily made for fans of their old stuff. Different does not mean bad. The Circle's a great rock record. What's About Now is a bit iffy, I'll give you that. Bridges isn't even a proper album, but it's got some amazing songs on it. This House Not For Sale is my second favourite album of all time. 2020's Odd, and Forever. I don't know, I plan to talk more about Forever in a video that I'm planning soon. The thing that does kind of get me about this comment is that the person that wrote it proceeded to then admit that they hadn't really heard anything after Crush, which is a bit unfair. It's quite a sweeping statement to say everything after Crush was poor if you haven't listened to them. Not to be mean, but And then someone else said the same thing. Crush was their last good album. People, I don't understand people that like Crush but don't like Bounce. Is it not the other way around? Like, if you're a fan of the earlier stuff, I would really have thought that you would be better suited to Bounce. But apparently, I don't know, apparently we've got some Crush fans out here. Stay should have been on Crush. Definitely, yeah. I did see an interesting perspective. I think it was from Han90, actually, that said it would probably have wrecked his voice live, which could be true, definitely. Save the World is the best Crush ballad. I don't know about objective best, again. Save the World is my favourite ballad of Crush by quite a big margin, but I think it's personal preference. I never necessarily clicked with Thank You for Loving Me, but it's a stunning wedding song, and I really understand why most people like it. I don't think you can objectively say that Save the World's the best ballad. She's a Mystery is a very underrated gem. Not my favourite song at all, but I've always said that I can see the value in it. I think it's different, you know, it's a unique production quality. If anything, it's quite similar to Destination Anywhere, and I don't think it was written too long after it, but I think it deserves to be there because it's unique and it's good. It's a well-written song. Sex Cells would have been much better if at least half the songs were swapped with B-sides. Why is everyone referring to Crush as Sex Cells? Sex Cells would have been much better if at least half the songs were swapped with B-sides. Take off the 2 mystery songs and leave them on the demo floor. Like I just said, I can see the value in She's a Mystery. I much prefer Mystery Train. Personally, I really like that song, but it's quite similar to Just Older and Next 100 Years. I actually prefer it to both of those songs, but I think the other two were objectively stronger. And I know that people love Next 100 Years for the guitar solo and stuff, but so I'd have to sacrifice Mystery Train. You could definitely swap half the album out though, no question. I'm going to make a video about that. Open All Night could be replaced by Another Reason to Believe. I am not a fan of Open All Night. I think people know this. It's one of my least favourite Bon Jovi songs. I kind of put it in the realm of She's a Mystery. It does make a good ending though. Probably because it puts you to sleep. Another Reason to Believe doesn't really have that quality. It doesn't have that effect. It wouldn't put you to sleep. Maybe it's a bit similar to some of the heavier songs, but it's definitely strong enough to be put on the album. You could probably have slotted it somewhere in the middle and then you could have ended with You Had Me From Hello. I think that would have made sense. Who Says You Can't Go Home and Do What You Can are better without Jennifer Nettles. I think that's personal preference. I much prefer Who Says You Can't Go Home without her. But I quite like the version of Do What You Can with her. Yeah, I don't know. Wildflower is top 3 Have a Nice Day songs. I don't think it makes top 3. I really like Wildflower, but like it's one of the blander songs on the album. Have a Nice Day itself, I Want to Be Loved, Last Man Standing, I Am, and probably a couple of others definitely top it 100%. Country Jovi is quite good apart from Do What You Can, but that could just be because of the subject matter. 90% of Highway is better than Who Says You Can't Go Home. I don't know, Who Says You Can't Go Home is quite an epic song. I adore Highway though, and I love every song except for maybe Last Night, maybe? That's a bit bland. Country Jovi's great though. People don't like it because they want a rock record, and they judge it as a rock record, which is bizarre. And I'm very sick of it. It's a country rock album, and it succeeds as being a country rock album. Like, no, it's not bad, because there's no Slippery When Wet type song on it. I don't understand that argument. It's very odd. And then next you've got Country Jovi and albums after Bounce is so ass. As I just said, no, I really don't think so. Lost Highway has the best ballads since These Days. That's probably true. There aren't too many ballads on the early 2000s albums. Till We Ain't Strangers Anymore and Seat Next to You are very, very, very strong songs. The Circle is one of their best post-2000s albums. Again, I don't know if that's an unpopular opinion. I think a lot of people would agree. The Circle tour was their last good tour. I think possibly yes. There are great moments from every tour. I don't know about 2022, because I didn't watch any of that. But there were great moments on the This Has Not For Sale tour and the What About Now tour. I don't know if you could classify either of those as great tours, though, overall. What About Now was kind of all over the place, because Richie left. John's voice was kind of struggling by This Has Not For Sale. So yeah, you could be very right there. Fast Cars and Learn to Love are very good songs. I'm not sure about that one. I think Fast Cars actually used to be my favourite off the Circle, but I've never really been under the notion that it's like a great song. I think it's good, but it's not like a carefully crafted masterpiece. It's, if anything on the circle could be constituted as filler, it could be that one. I don't know. And I confess that I never really liked Learn to Love, probably my least favourite on the circle. I think the problem is that it's got similar themes to Live Before You Die, but just done in a less interesting way. Like, Live Before You Die is cinematic, and it's got instrumentation choices that you don't really find in other Bon Jovi songs. Whereas Learn to Love is more forgettable. Like, it's good, but I don't know about very good. Love's the Only Rule is the best The Circle song. Again, I don't know. Like, I was never too keen on it until recently, but I've always known it was a great song, you know? John is right to love it so much because it gets... The way it comes together live, and even in studio, is magical. There are a lot of great songs on The Circle, but I don't think it's far from the top. Like, maybe top 3, up there with Happy Now and, I don't know, something else. What About Now is better than Forever. Possibly, yeah. I think the problem with What About Now is that it kind of falls apart in the second half, for me. I think Forever is stronger all the way through, but Forever kind of lacks a signature track. It's not got a masterpiece song, whereas What About Now has Amen, or Amen, as they say in America, and that's a great track that gives What About Now the boost that it really needed. Whereas Forever, it's got a lot of solid tracks, but it doesn't have like a whoa song, you know? What About Now has the best solo since These Days? No, I don't agree with that. I think the solos on all of the albums, except for maybe Lost Highway, are probably better than What About Now. Oh god, what is this? Beautiful World is the second best What About Now song. Presumably after Amen. No, I still think no, absolutely not. It's kind of it's a forgettable song that, like, I enjoy it, don't get me wrong, but it doesn't have any special features that would make it, like, the best. Like, what's your reasoning for calling it the best? I would be really interested. Because I would actually say that it's probably weaker. Like, it's not a very standout track. Bon Jovi's not the same band now that it was when it was just 5 guys in a dream. The Shanks era of the band doesn't have that same magic. I mean, in a way, I agree, but I also don't. I think, yeah, it's given that after 40 years, the band are not going to be the same. Like, they're not going to be the same, they're not going to have the same magic at the age of 63 plus that they did when they were 25, you know? Like, if you think about it, back then, they were just exploding onto the scene. That's, you know, they were doing everything for the first time. It was just peak excitement. Whereas they've lived all that now. They achieved that dream. They're different, though. I know what you mean, because they are different. Like, the Shanks era doesn't have the same magic. We know that I like a lot of the stuff from the Shanks era, but it is different. But it's been 30 years. Like, of course, they're not going to be the same. I don't really listen to stuff post-Crush, with the exception of Have a Nice Day or Highway. However, I've been listening to This House Not For Sale and Burning Bridges a lot, and I'm really appreciating many songs. Yeah, that's great, because there are so many really strong tracks that people don't give any chance to, because they're just like, oh no, Richie's not there, it's John Shanks, I don't want to listen to that. But I swear to God, if you listen to them, I think that you really end up enjoying a lot of them, you know? John doing so many Runaway tours finished his voice. I mean, I read somewhere that John practices singing like 3 hours a day. So if he was doing that in, like, the peak of his vocal troubles, I don't know. Like, that could have been a detriment, I don't know. He probably should have given it a rest in that 2015 onwards period. I don't know. I've never been to a Runaway tour, I don't really know what's happening there. People that don't like Burning Bridges or This House Not For Sale just never listen to them. I think yes, or they never gave them a chance. I think it's probably the same thing that I mentioned earlier, where they're judging This House Not For Sale as a heavier rock record, as opposed to what it actually is. Like, people are so unfair when it comes to their critiques of those albums, because they don't just say, oh, it's not for me, you know, it's too light for me. They say, oh, it's awful, which is so unfair because they're not, you know? It makes me very angry. You can raise valid critiques if you have them, like, but It's Bad is not a critique, it just makes you look like a child. Lyrically, it's one of the best Bon Jovi albums, and I will never stop singing its praises. It's a very emotional album, it's a very vulnerable album. It might not have the oomph that you desire in certain songs, but, like, it's there if you look for it. Devils in the Temple is a great rock song. Who Would You Die For? There are moments in... Well, Who Would You Die For is obviously Burning Bridges, but there are moments in each of these albums post-Richie that you will find that you will really enjoy, I think, if you give them a chance. Just because something doesn't cater to your preferences as, like, a hard rock song doesn't mean it's terrible. Like, it annoys me so much. This one's interesting. If Fingerprints or Blind Love had been on these days, they would have been considered classic by now. I agree. And I think people are very, as I've just said, I think people are really unwilling to give songs of that era a chance. If A Teardrop to the Sea and Who Would You Die For had been released on on These Days, like, those songs fit on These Days. Obviously, it's a bit different with the production quality and stuff, but if, like, you could fit that song on These Days and imagine that they recorded it in the same way in 1995, it would fit. Those are These Days songs on a recent album, and I don't understand why people don't see that. And they would be considered classic, because Teardrop to the Sea is a great song. I don't know about Fingerprints, but Blind Love, yeah, I don't know. Burning Bridges' title song is the worst on the album. I disagree. I think, again, people judge the Burning Bridges title song in the same way as they judge the other songs. Whereas it's not supposed to be some, like, great rock song and thought-provoking, It's supposed to be like a fun hootenanny fuck you, like, end to an album that they didn't even want to write. If you look at it, it achieved everything that it set out to do. Also, the weakest on the album, or the worst on the album, I would absolutely 100% say is We All Fall Down. I don't know if I've ever met someone that likes We All Fall Down, except for one person, and I think that this one person might have been the one that actually wrote this opinion. So yeah, no, I think We All Fall Down is probably the weakest. I can't get into that song, and I also can't find any, like, value in it. Knockout is the worst song on This House Is Not For Sale. No, Reunion. 2020 album was underrated. There are some strong moments that people don't talk about, probably because the singles were so underwhelming that people didn't bother to check the rest of the album out. I like a lot of 2020 songs. Absolutely. I love Let It Rain, I love Brothers in Arms, and I obviously love the bonus tracks. I think it just is unfortunately brought down by some weaker songs. Limitless is a bad song. It's bland. I don't know if it's bad. Like, I'm just kind of indifferent to it. It's not single-worthy, but it's just kind of there. Shine and Luv Can are the best 2020 songs. I don't know if I've ever met anybody that doesn't feel this way. I think everyone agrees with that. JBJ Experience is kind of a scam. I never bought it, so I don't know. But I think the videos side of it is good. I see videos on YouTube of him kind of reminiscing on old videos and talking through them. But the stuff that they put in those boxes are diabolical, and I wouldn't even want them. Like, I would throw them away. It sucks that big acts like Bon Jovi didn't come to third world countries in their heyday. Yeah, probably did suck. I don't know. Having songs on region-specific versions is annoying. If you have more songs, then release it as a deluxe edition. I don't really understand why they don't do that. I'm sure that there's, like, a specific marketing reason why they do regional releases, but I just don't understand, because I feel like if you put a deluxe album out, more people are going to buy it than a regional specific disc. I don't know. Someone explain. I'm sure someone knows why they do that. Anyway, that was every single one of the opinions that I got sent. I don't think I left any. If I did, then I'm very sorry. You can leave it in the comments and I will respond in text format. I would love to hear everyone's reaction to every comment. Also, just please remember that they're all my opinions. Like, that, I'm not an objective Bon Jovi speaker, and I'm my opinion isn't the gospel. I welcome you very much to have your own opinion and argue with me in the comments. It's all in good fun.